sure it says live here. Does he have to log in again?
No, that's you.
Okay, that's right, that is me. That's like, let's get it. Start a call. No problem. Guys, we will start a special edition of the I Love CVille show here in a couple of minutes. Bellamy Brown is going to be our special guest today. Bellamy Brown is the chairman of the Police Civilian Review Board, and he made quite an impactful statement at the end of last week that certainly needs a lot of the spotlight and attention. I was impressed with the statement. And I actually had a conversation on the downtown mall with one of Charlottesville's finest that was looking forward to this interview and wanted me to pass along to you a thank you for the statement that you made. So we're going to talk about that today on the special edition of the I Love CVille show with Bellamy Brown in-house. This gentleman, an unquestioned leader here in our community of Charlottesville and Central Virginia. I have a feeling after this interview, you're going to see this statement and topic pretty much in every media outlet in town. NBC 29, CBS 19, the Daily Progress, and the CVille Weekly. Judah, do you have his statement in totality that we can play and air when we need to, sir? Oh, you're a good man, Judah. We can start today's program, my friend, when you're ready. Chris Moody, hello, welcome to the broadcast. Guys, give the show a like and a share. We'll spend about half an hour with Bellamy Brown, the chairman of the Police Civilian Review Board here in Charlottesville. J-Dubs, we're in your hands. Guys, good Monday afternoon. Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show, a special edition of the I Love CVille show, 2:30 start as opposed to our 12:30. We have a good friend of the program, Bellamy Brown, in our studio. We will get to him in a matter of moments. We're going to spend about a half an hour discussing the statement Bellamy Brown made at the end of last week at a Police Civilian Review Board meeting. The chairman's statement at the end of the meeting has been the talk of police circles in Central Virginia. I've heard from a handful of Charlottesville and Albemarle County's finest, not only about the interview we're doing with Mr. Brown, the statement Mr. Brown made, applauding the courage coming from Bellamy Brown with this statement. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Judah, why don't we go to the two-shot and let's have the statement from the chairman, Mr. Brown, ready to go here in moments. But first, the two-shot with Bellamy. How are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing well. Thank you for making it.
Yeah.
You got a number of folks. Carol Thorpe, hello. An attorney that often gets involved at the Civilian Review Board meetings through public comment and watching the show as we speak, as is the Daily Progress. All right, so we'll play the statement for everybody so they can hear it. Before we do, set the stage of what prompted you, inspired you to make this statement.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it starts back when I first got appointed to the review board. I was approached by officers, of CPD. Obviously, my background with policing, I was a little, kind of skeptical or whatever. But I thought to inform my role on the board, obviously be open to hearing, what they had to say. And that's what I did. I just listened over the course of a year, learned about things, how things are run. And so I also have an employment law and HR background, so that, made me perk up even more. just about the dynamics, and really, I knew that at some point this would come to a head, but given where the board was, in its infancy, we weren't in a place to really kind of address that, and since we've gotten some other things here, it seems like it's basically like a perfect storm, kind of, so to speak. So the other part was that I think not just within the police department, but in other areas of the community and other organizations involved in this process, there were similar concerns, and so it was known, but no one was really doing anything about it or interested in doing anything about it. And so, I have over a decade of organizational management and leadership experience. I know how all these things tie together, from the employment law, HR, finance, accounting, operations, how it affects an organization overall. Obviously, human capital, human resources is a major part of running any organization. So I looked at everything through all those lenses, recognized that no one was really, they identified that yes, there was a problem, but we're not going to say anything about it. And that's not how I've ever done business. That's not how I was ever trained. And so that, the fact that no one else was doing anything kind of is what, moved the ball forward with the information that I already had. In addition, so I guess it's, there's this talk of we're, out defending the PBA or whatever, but the PBA got wind that, I was already down this road, and it was only like a few weeks ago. So I hadn't even talked to them. I don't think I knew of Mr. Wells until our prior PCRB meeting, when he basically commented.
Detective Mike Wells, Elmore County.
Yes, when he essentially was questioning, the relevance of the CRB and everything else. So this has been something that's been, like, the entirety of the past year, I've been, given information about how things are, and I've, again, spoken with other people in the community who have known that this is the way things are, and nobody's doing anything. So as a Marine in leadership, you learn to follow and you also learn to lead. Typically, if there's someone who's already leading, whatever, I don't have any problems, following. But if there's a problem, a significant problem, and nobody's doing anything about it, well, then I'm typically going to step up. And so that's kind of where, how we got here.
So we'll play Chairman Brown's statement here in a couple minutes. The gist of what you're about to hear, and so much compelled me or inspired me from your statement.
Yeah.
One of the things that stood out to me, you said, when I joined the Civilian Review Board, I thought I was going to be holding officers fairly accountable on behalf of citizens.
Yeah.
I never thought I would be holding leadership in the police department accountable on behalf of the officers.
Yeah.
Another thing that struck me from your statement was it's paramount in this election cycle to vote the candidates into office that want the police and the department run the right way.
Yeah.
So a lot to unpack with that one as well.
Sure.
Why don't we, J-Dubs, play the statement? You want to add something before we play it?
Well, if we're gonna go, all in, like, I am, yes, I recognize the capacity under which I said those statements, but I am operating here as Bellamy Brown, private citizen of this community. Right. So.
And that's important to emphasize. You now have the newspaper, Daily Progress,
Yeah.
and CBS 19 watching you here.
Sure.
So this is going to be, and I'm getting text messages from the reporters here. All right, so this will be in the news here. This is Chairman Bellamy Brown's statement as a private citizen.
Correct. So I understand on Thursday, I was in my capacity as, as chairman of the PCRB. But in this right now, if we're, going in the space that I think we're going, I am operating as a private citizen who, lives in this community, a black man in this community who, I have friends in this community that are affected by policing. So, like, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, James Watson, your colleague from the board, is watching. Mm-hmm. Jeffrey Fratcher watching the program. Vanessa Parkhill, Carol Thorpe, a number of police officers, some CPD and some Albemarle County Police Department now watching. Judah Wickhauer, do you have that ready to rock and roll, my friend? Okay, let's cue the statement, please, in 3, in 2, in 1.
So the next item on the agenda is the chairman's statement on the need for strong leadership on police oversight. It's been modified a little bit on police leadership and its community impact. And so we'll just go with that. Good evening, members of the board, city leadership, and the community. While I'm currently chairman of the Civilian Review Board, the views in this statement are purely my own. I believe that there is a crisis in leadership and morale in the Charlottesville Police Department. Over the course of the past year, I have been meeting with officers from the Charlottesville Police Department in order to become a better informed member of the Police Civilian Review Board. Many of those conversations have led me to speak with other senior leaders in our community for corroboration and additional facts. Those sources will remain confidential. However, the content of this statement has been corroborated by at least 2 sources for the facts presented. This statement is made without regard to race or gender, but rather leadership capacity and effectiveness. Over the course of my discussions with CPD officers and other senior local leaders, the board has learned of the existence of a command climate survey, that which we just voted to receive the rest, which was designed to provide an internal gauge of the conditions of the Charlottesville Police Department. The Police Civilian Review Board was provided with one of the 70 response forms. The respondent states that leadership takes problems around the department personally, leadership is not open to evaluation and improvement, and that the survey will not be taken seriously by leadership and used to move the department as a whole in a positive direction. It's further stated that the officer is actively seeking employment elsewhere, with leadership and their decisions being a major factor. Of particular note, the officer states, "I would really like to see the morale in the department be in a much better place. This is huge in retaining staff. Pay is important, but appreciation is key," end quote. It's also my understanding that the other 69 responses present a similarly dire picture. Additionally, the Police Benevolence Association has subsequently conducted another survey under which 80 to 90% of the 65 responding officers reported a negative view of the climate inside of the Charlottesville Police Department due to the perceived leadership shortcomings. I've also been made aware that officers of the PBA have been threatened with retaliation if the survey is published. Through additional conversations with senior local government leaders, the problems with police morale and unresponsive and inflexible management have been known for some time, but no action has been taken to date. It is my recommendation that community members email and call all members of City Council and the city manager every day until action is taken on behalf of the greater good of the community. Additionally, it is my recommendation that community members follow my lead and support City Council candidates in favor of strong police oversight for Charlottesville City Council in November. If there was ever a case showing why this board should be fully funded and supported, this is it, due to the fact that this is the only government entity that has been transparent with the public on this matter and bringing this to the public's attention. A strong policing oversight body would also provide officers with a place to bring reports of abuses and policy violations without fear of retaliation or fear of an unfair process. I've also received correspondence that's been sent to members of city leadership, and I'll just read a few excerpts. The men and women of the Charlottesville Police Department are hurting. They are looking around the national and local landscapes and only seeing negative examples and opinions of police work amplified at the expense of the majority in this profession. Naturally, we would look to our leadership in the department to demonstrate our good works and represent us as police officers to our community. Unfortunately, we have lost faith in the leadership of this department. We've realized that we can no longer rely on the standard procedures that provide due process. As mentioned previously, There was a subsequent survey, and from that, I will read just 5 questions. 1, if you are accused of violating policy, do you believe you will receive a fair administrative process? 82% of the 65 respondents said no. Have the actions of leadership caused you to reduce your normal policing activities, traffic stops, arrests, community policing, etc., for fear of being unfairly targeted? 82% say yes. Do you feel professionally supported? 71% say no. Is training at CPD readily available, sufficient in scope, and applicable to your daily duties? 63% say no. What are the 4 largest concerns CPD faces presently? And these are in order: lack of trust and faith, unfair discipline, low morale, and pay. From the information that's been provided to me through officers in this community, I believe it is incumbent upon us as a community to hear what they are saying and to request that city leadership take action as appropriate. When I arrived on this board, I arrived with the intent of advocating for community members in the community. Advocating for officers in the community never crossed my mind. However, due to the current climate and what we are trying to do as a board, this is something that's necessary in order for us to get to where we need to go. And that's the truth. That's being transparent. That's letting the public know exactly where we stand as a community in this particular space. And with that, I will open it up to comments from any members of the board.
Okay, so that's Bellamy Brown's statement from the last Civilian Review Board meeting at the end of the meeting. I found it inspiring. I found it courageous. I found it thought-provoking. I know it's a statement that's gained a lot of positive traction with police, Charlottesville, Albemarle County. What is the broad strokes recap, and then we'll get into specifics.
I mean, just essentially that, there's a crisis of leadership and morale. That's based on data-driven evidence that exists. And it's not just at that space, it's in other spaces within the community itself. And then really, just a call for, city leadership to address the matter in a way that benefits the community as a whole. Those are essentially the high points, of it.
The statement, I touched on this before we replayed your words here. The statement where you said, I went into this, and this is volunteer, right?
Yeah.
I went into this, he's volunteering his time, guys. He's giving away his most precious commodity here, and he's come into a thorn's nest, if you may. The statement you said that when I volunteered my time, I thought I would be in fair and honest capacity holding police officers accountable. Yeah. Now I found myself holding police leadership and CPD accountable on behalf of the police officers themselves. Yeah. Walk us through what that meant.
So in summer of 2017, I was in Fairfax County at the time. Obviously a lot of stuff was going on. But a friend of mine, a coworker of mine, 2 black men, full dress suit, work suits, we were just outside, wrapping up the day, and then comes by, 3 unmarked Fairfax County police officers, and then everything goes south because we looked suspicious, So, and that, that experience, that's a shortened version, that experience, left a negative taste in my mouth with regard to police. And it, traumatized me for, at least a good 6 months afterwards. So, and I knew because I hadn't done anything, like the passion for advocating, for folk who, I had capital at the time to go and pay a lawyer to fight it. The people who don't have that money to go and fight those things, that, I recognize that, and that put a passion in me to want to be able to fight on their behalf. And so, and that's still, what my aim is here. But the other part, again, recognize, my background in employment law, human resources, finance, and organizational management, leadership, looking at the whole thing, I recognize that there is, a significant problem that exists there. And when you take policing in and of itself, it's obviously a high stress job. You see all the traumas that most regular folk don't see. Here in the U.S., they're trained, roughly 21 and a half weeks compared to over in Europe where it's, 3 years or a bachelor's degree. And in some of that training, it's like, the public is out to get you, be careful, and they stick a gun in your hand and you go out. So there's that aspect. On top of it is this other aspect that, that was opened up in the meeting, and that I'd known for, the better part of a year, that, the PBA, shared some information on. You take that added stress on top of all these other things, and where are they policing the most? In the Black and brown communities. So the propensity for something bad happen significantly increases. Charlottesville is good for pandering to Black folk, for coming back home. When I look at how I grew up, where 10th and Page and all these other places were filled with Black folk, and where we are now, and we're not participating in the economy that's taken place. We're steadily being kicked out. There are two things that this country operates on. It's economic freedom and it's physical freedom. Well, you just told the story about where Black folk play in that economic freedom part here in Charlottesville. The next best thing is to ensure that they have that physical freedom. Well, if you're creating this environment to where their rights are going to be violated at a greater percent, that just doesn't sit well with me. I don't care about symbolisms. I want something that's going to be tangible for the community that I said I'm serving. And you can't have all this stuff and sugarcoat me, and with the board trying to do what it is. I mean, this is an apolitical board. You got folk on there that have put a lot of sweat equity, a lot of hours for the community as a whole, and you get some resistance to that when we're trying to do in good faith what's in the best interest of our community. And folk know that there's this other thing over here that's, those, I'm not cool with that.
So is the gist of what's happening here leadership atop the totem pole, which I would think is that Chief Brackney here has created a...
I have, so part of that statement itself was drafted under the consultation of, a board member or two, in addition to our legal counsel.
Okay.
And so...
We have to call it leadership in general.
Yes.
Okay. So the leadership within CPD, the discussions that you've had with sources within the department, is the leadership within CPD is not doing things either the right way or in a way that will create positive morale. And we've seen the tremendous attrition and turnover within this police department. There's tremendous turnover here. And having institutional memory within a police department is beneficial for policing a community, because a beat cop, knowing his or her beat, is going to be able to police that beat in a more positive way than if someone that's new to the beat?
So I have to be careful with what I say because there's still
And you got the news watching you here.
my statements can identify folks. So in trying to keep confidential about various things. It's more of so the employee morale. I know a lot of people focus on employee morale. Well, that's again, I had 500 to 700 words that I could do, and I mean that's the wording that came out. But from what I understand from officers, it's far more challenging than just employee morale, to put it in that space. I read in the statement, there's aspects with regard to training. There's aspects. I believe that they listed the top 4 problems. I guess lack of faith and trust. I know pay was the last one, and I forget the other 2 in the middle. And that's, we're spending $19 million on police personnel. That's a huge investment for our community. At the very least,
Roughly 10% of a city budget.
Yeah.
200 and some million, city
Yeah.
budget for Charlottesville, 19
Yeah.
for personnel within the department.
Yeah. So, at the very least, if you have a majority of them that are, raising flags, at $19 million investment, you ought to take a listen.
Should consider it.
Yeah, at the very least.
Yeah.
And all of the employment law and human resources literature that are out there says that it should be considered. A stronger word is investigation. So and I can't like I said, my background plays a lot into this, into how I think about this and how I see all of this, and that's kind of what has driven a lot of my efforts, in conjunction with the fact that nobody else is stepping up or has stepped up.
This is from Jennifer Friedman. Can you give us some insight into the surveys you were referencing?
I don't have, so we got, so there are two surveys. There's the Police Benevolence Association survey, which,
The PBA.
yes, which my understanding is a replica done again by the officers of the actual climate survey, which we have one of those. We're requesting the other 69, but it was in my statement that I read about what the officers were saying about leadership and the climate and the training and all the other things. So that's that's really kind of the overall gist. I'm sure they each have their own personal details and stories of their own experiences. I know for a fact that a few are assembling their own files for future action, and I'm like,
you encourage them to do that.
I encourage the others, because at this point, again, coming from my HR lens, absolutely, 100%, without a doubt.
Basically, paper the trail.
You keep documentation of what's going on for your own record. When you get to a point to where, some people may be like, well, I may not do anything now, maybe I'll, whatever. When you get to that point and you got to go back and refer, you don't have it. Well, now if you start doing that, you will actually have it to be able to refer back to. And I think that, if folk are not going to take it seriously and folk aren't, going to listen, then that's what you have to do. I've had to do that in my career.
Sure.
And
It's pretty common practice in the business world.
and I think some folk may be like, oh well, this kind of environment's everywhere. Just because it's everywhere doesn't make it right.
Right.
And especially when you're talking about
The law.
and
Yeah.
adding stress on top of adding more stress on top of the folk, and then sticking them in black and brown communities to police.
Right.
Like, it's fine when folk don't have any incidents and say, oh, policing's fine and everything else. And part of it is the statement is geared more towards the fallacy that everything is good in policing. Everything is right. We don't need a PCRB, yada, yada, yada. This is, primarily for the pro-police crowd to open up and see what's really there. I mean, we already know where the anti-police crowd is. It's the pro-police crowd that thinks everything's hunky-dory, and it's not necessarily.
Well, the pro-police crowd is, and I've said on this network multiple times that I'm pro-police.
Yeah.
I've said this multiple times on this network. I can't imagine what it's like, man or woman, put your clothes on, walk out the door, and not sure if you come back safely, alive, harmed, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And then my mindset with that went to a different level when I got married and have a kid, okay? Not knowing whether or not man or woman in police come back and they have a son or daughter at home, wife or husband at home, adds another layer to it.
No.
The pro-police crowd often thinks that the police are treated unfairly, that the level of distrust between the community and the police has never been greater. A lot of that has to do with the murder of George Floyd last year in Minneapolis, created a tremendous division between the police and citizens. Throw in the fact that Charlottesville PD, for the most part, can't afford to live in the community they serve. That adds another layer here. I mean, the city and the county are gentrifying and getting so expensive so quickly that Albemarle County police officers and Charlottesville police officers cannot live in the communities they serve, which is wrong, which is absolutely wrong. So what I learned from your statement, and I feel like I'm more connected than most, reading the news, following the news, interviewing stakeholders like yourself, what I learned from your statement as someone who is pro-police is that it is not hunky-dory, and that maybe why it's not copacetic is because of leadership, in particular in the city, creating this sense of bitterness, distrust, always looking over your shoulder, walking on eggshells to maintain your job. And then you add that mentality once you walk in the door, you're walking on eggshells, you don't know who you can trust in your department, and then you have to go into, like you said, the black and brown community with that mindset, going into a community that already probably does not either respect you or trust you to have you in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then I can see why you're championing this or using your platform, if you may, to highlight it.
Yeah.
Because that's something that should be highlighted.
Yeah, and that's at the end of the day, and it's not. I'm not saying. So right now the police, the PBA, they're out in front because they said, okay, we'll be out in front. It's not that there aren't other stakeholders that are out there.
They're led by a very respected guy in Detective Mike Wells.
Well, no. I'm talking about Mike Wells and everybody else. I'm talking about that's the police. That's the police in general. I'm saying there are other stakeholders outside of the police that So just because they stepped up doesn't mean that they're the only ones, because they're not. And so, yeah. At the end of the day, for me, when I look at how this, will have an impact on the community itself and the people that are going to bear the brunt of it.
It's the black and brown community.
Yeah, and so, it's not to say that the police officers perspective or view is secondary, but at the end of the day, when it all trickles down, they say crap rolls downhill.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to fall.
And that's why you ran for council.
Yeah.
In the first place, right?
Yeah.
Is to give a voice to the voiceless.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't, and then there's, there are other concerns that, that have come up. One that I'm still trying to find the answer to. So I guess it was, the Gilmore case, there's this idea of being unlawfully detained, but, having a reasonable use of force used against you. Well, I'm looking around the legal profession, and nobody can tell me. You
were posting about this on Facebook.
Yeah, nobody can tell me that. They're like, I don't know. It's and a judiciary, a court of law, is typically the one who would make that determination. So how do we end up with that? Another thing for me was, I guess, when the shootings were happening, and you know, they were over in First Street, and you know, there were calls made, you know, and I guess there was some comment or what have you that it's like, all right, well, you know, we'll come there, but you know, don't get mad at us when we start picking up, you know, your black man in XYZ. Those are, so there are a bunch of these things that are just, for me, you know, in the space that I've come from, it's, you know, it's enough. And again, nobody else, everybody's like, yeah, we see it, but we're not going to do anything about it. That doesn't work for me.
This is from Larry's watching the program here. He says, has morale been at this level for some time? And can he put in perspective how morale was with former Chief Longo, who seemed to have been beloved by the department?
So I can't, as far as a gauge or measurement, like I don't, you know, I think that's going to have to come from the officers themselves. Like I only have the, I don't know, I wouldn't say higher level. My level isn't as deep as their personal experiences. They have to tell that, you know, themselves. But there's enough of these, and there's enough, there's been enough concern around other parts of the community that it's like, all right, this has to be, you know, the public has to know, because the folk that are getting paid, you know, the tax dollars aren't doing anything about it. So, and if you can't, I've seen the resistance that we've gotten when the PCRB has tried to get, you know, some of these things done. And I don't like, given what I know now and given what I've learned, I don't like the deference that has been given when folk knew or know that there's a problem. Especially when, again, we got good, hardworking people volunteering to bring something on behalf of the community as a whole, you know, to the table. We've done the research with NACOLE and all the other, or with NACOLE, and you know, Bill Mendez has done a great job with, you know, the due diligence on the ordinance and everything else. We're not just going to go home but with our head between our legs and, you know, oh, thank you, and water it down like the one previously. So it's, you know, there's a number of factors that I live here. I live in this community, and, you know, as a private citizen, like, knowing all this, you know, everybody doesn't get to see this view. Everybody's, you know, going on, you know, with life or whatever. But knowing all this, no, I'm not accepting this. You're not going to get taxpayer dollars and give us this. Like, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to address this issue, and wholeheartedly. I think, you know, when the officers get to a point to where they have enough data, shoot your shot. You know, if nobody's going to listen, if that's what it's going to take for folk to listen, then by all means, you know.
Grayson, this is a great comment right here. Jerry, I'm listening to this entire interview in my car through Spotify. Bellamy Brown is a perfect example of why the executive director position at the Civilian Review Board should have been hired from within the community, someone like Mr. Brown. Bringing someone from an executive director position that does not know the community inside and out is wrong and does a disservice to the city of Charlottesville. The second part of my statement, and then he puts a colon, please offer some insight into what he means by basically voting the right people into office to fix this problem.
Sure. So that was another point of contention in my statement. You know, for me, at the end of the day, I've talked to folk who are running, and
You're a connected guy. You know a lot of people.
I do. And me personally, as a private citizen, I'm voting for Juan Wade and Brian Pinkston. So take with that what you will, but that's what I'm doing.
Can I ask the natural follow-up? You don't have to answer it. You probably
Fair
know where
enough.
I'm going to go here. I think I have to do my job here.
Sure.
The incumbent, the mayor, you didn't include in that short list. Why?
Well, there's only 2 seats.
Right. There are only 2 seats. That's a fair response right there. The man handled that answer extremely well. Besides the fact that there are only 2 seats, why is she not on that list when she has 4 years on the dais working with the police? That was a good response, Bellamy.
You know, again,
Because she's not pro-police.
I am looking at this from a lot of information that a lot of folk don't have, primarily from the standpoint of how do we get a civilian review board that is, you know, going to be able to advocate fairly, you know, what their needs are when their government oversteps their bounds. And for me, you know, in my, I've spoken to Brian, I've spoken to Juan.
Those 2 gentlemen, if I lived in the city, would have my vote as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we can leave it at that.
Yeah.
Your colleague on the board, James Watson, giving you props. He says, thank you for coming back home and putting in the work to make our community better. Grayson echoes what James just said. What is the role of an effective civilian review board, police civilian review board? Because right now,
Yeah.
you guys are probably a shadow of what you should be
Yeah.
because of external limitations preventing you from really blossoming to what the board should be. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think it's also, you know, the historical context as well. I think that a lot of folk have, well, prior to this, you know, labeled the board anti-police. I think that narrative, you know, as I, you know, talking to folk, you know, carried throughout. And, you know, for me, at the end of the day, we are apolitical. When I talk about the folk that are doing the work for the community, we are looking at this as a mechanism. We're not looking at this as a, you know, something to be politicized or what have you. So you said, what is the effective? What is the role?
Yeah. What does an effective board look like? Civilian
You know,
review board.
every you know, in you know, doing training with NACOL and everything, every civilian review board is different. I think it, you know, I don't have their 6 or 8, you know, key tenets, but one of those is building bridges between the police and the community itself. Another one is risk management for cities, i.e. Charlottesville. It's educating the public on, you know, what their rights are in interacting with the police. It's really going out and having the mechanisms for where the public can, you know, speak and tell us what's going on. You know, what are the challenges? Like, you know, how do we get that engagement or what have you. And it's, you know, it's looking at, again, in this. I mean, I'll do a plug for us since we just adopted the ordinance, but, you know, here we're looking at, you know, receiving and investigating issue findings on complaints from civilians regarding the conduct of law enforcement, investigate and issue findings on incidents, including the use of force and other incidents regarding the conduct of law enforcement, recommend to the chief of police disciplinary action, investigate policies, practices, procedures of the police department, and make recommendations regarding changes, review investigations conducted internally by the police department, request reports of annual expenditures of the police department to make budgetary recommendations to City Council, make public reports on the activities of the PCRB, including investigations, hearings, findings, recommendations, hold hearings, and apply for subpoenas. Those are the highlights. But those are, I mean, there are a ton of things that go into it overall. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, when you strip away all the other things, there has to be a mechanism for the citizens of this community to be able to raise the red flag, the BS flag, when their government violates their rights. and that's ultimately, and it has to be, sustainable. It has to be, have legitimacy and credibility, and that's what it is. This is, it goes back to the Constitution where, citizens have a right to petition their government regarding their grievances. This is the same thing, and when you have 17,000 people living in poverty here, and you don't have, a plethora of public defenders to help them go out and raise the BS flag, well, this is a mechanism
It's
for
an
that.
alternative mechanism.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost them anything.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I get that. What do you think of this comment from Katrina Turner?
Sure.
Okay, both sides. She says the CRB was formed for the people, not to be sympathetic to the police. Katrina Turner adds, the board was formed because of how the police treated citizens.
Absolutely, and that I don't disagree with that, but again, there are steps that trickle down, to the citizens themselves. This is an indirect effect on the citizens. So, and I think a lot of people miss that. They don't. Again, you miss the part about policing being already high stress and trauma related and everything else. They miss the part about our training in the U.S. being, a lot shorter than what's over in Europe, and sticking the gun in the hand and going out and policing the community. You add that, you already got that. You add this situation, that's additional stress, add it on top, and then stick them out in the community. If we're not advocating that, change should be taking place, especially when it's, again, not just in the police department, but in other aspects of the community. I don't know how that's not, advocating on behalf of the community. Just because you see that focal point because they raise their hand, it doesn't mean that impact, when it gets better, is not going to have a positive impact on the community. I've spoken to other, when we talk about these complaints and everything coming in, I've spoken to other, former officers like, well, you guys really haven't found them all. When I hear those things, those are concerning. And when you tie in that perspective of leadership, that's, having a significant impact beyond than just your employee morale, and that's through my HR and employment law lens. It's a recipe for disaster, and I'm not about that.
I think
I
that's
don't have
fair.
I don't have to live in that environment as a black man in this community who is contributing to this community, who knows other black men in this community that have these interactions with policing. We don't have to accept that, So
This text message comes in. I'm going to paraphrase this one. And this is the paraphrasing. Are the officers hesitant to speak up about this for fear of retribution or loss of job?
Yeah, so sorry. So part of the reasons why are financially, for fear of loss of job, for fear of retaliation within the environment. So and this is an example that I was given. Obviously, I didn't have it firsthand. So if an officer were given a specific directive, the officer said, "Well, I don't know if that's legal." It's like, do it anyway. The officer goes to Commonwealth's attorney, asks if it's legal. Commonwealth attorney says it's not legal. Officer goes back and says it's not legal. And then they get written up. So those types of things. I mean, it just over time it creates a culture of constant stress. And how do I know this? Because I've experienced this type of environment. I know what it does over time. And again, so let's take worker productivity for our $19 million. For our $19 million, if you measure what worker productivity is within the police department, I guarantee you it wouldn't be as high as it should be for $19 million. So you have to look at those things.
More stuff coming in here. Keith Smith is giving you some props first. You have both TV stations watching you now. You have the Progress reporter still watching as we're speaking here. So this one's coming in. Can we get back to why Juan and Mr. Wade and Mr. Pinkston are Mr. Bellamy's pick for this election?
Sure, because I've spoken to them about the PCRB itself, about the work that we are doing, and I've had in-depth conversations with them. I think Brian out the gate was like, yeah, I'm in support of a strong PCRB, and I've spoken to him on several occasions. And again, from this perspective, I'm looking at the work that the board has done, and how do we get people that are in support of what we've done to get it across the finish line, because it hasn't crossed the finish line yet. It still has to go to city council, and then beyond that, there is we got to work on operating procedures, which will take us into the 2022 year. So it's based on the fact that I've had conversations with both of them about the board, about its work, and about what we're trying to do, is why they're my pick. Not to mention, with regard to, Juan has contributed significantly to the community over the years. Everybody knows that. When I came back home, he was the person that I was out in the street with doing volunteer stuff. Like, he took me under his wing, and that's how I got started in this space here. So, yeah.
Joe Plantania and Jim Hingley, Commonwealth's attorney, Albemarle County, and the city of Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Got a lot of respect for Jim and for Joe. To use Mayor Walker's term, Joe is the top cop in Charlottesville, and Mr. Hingley, Jim Hingley, is the top cop in Albemarle County. They're the Commonwealth's attorney. They have an approach with how they go about their job, where it's, if the opportunity presents, we'll find alternative measures for holding people accountable besides jail time.
Yeah.
Or prison time.
Yeah.
With Joe in office and with Jim in office, we've had probably the lowest number of folks in jail and prison in this area for some time. Is that at all, that dynamic, impacting what we have going on?
No, not from the lens through which I'm looking at it.
Okay.
The lens through which I'm looking at it, again, has been something that's been grown over the past year. Speaking with various respected stakeholders in this space, it's not just the policing problem. It's again, with trying to get stuff done with the PCRB and other areas of the community, and again, no one who's receiving taxpayer dollars has stepped up. So it's just this perfect storm of all these things that have come together.
Al Thomas, former police chief, retires unexpectedly. Chief Brackney has had somewhat of a tumultuous time in Charlottesville as police chief of the city of Charlottesville. She was on a short list for a Dallas police chief opening. She did not get that job. This is the toughest one I'm going to ask you. And if you can't answer it, that's completely fair. I totally get it.
Sure.
Do we think a change needs to happen atop the totem pole?
I think the folk who can make that decision or are responsible for that decision know the answer to that.
Who are those people? The officers themselves? This is council, and that's where this November election comes into play.
The folk who can make that decision,
Understood.
they already know the answers. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, follow up on that then.
Yeah.
With the two spots that are open, and I think Juan's a big-time favorite to win.
Yeah.
I think the second spot, Could go Pinkston's way, could go Nakia Walker's way. Yaz, I respect her hustle and chutzpah. I still think she's somewhat of an unknown commodity and somewhat young. I don't see her getting one of the two spots. I do think Mayor Walker has a very good shot at winning the second spot. So does Brian Pinkston. How important is this election and why when it comes to the police department? Like, walk us through the mechanics of what could happen.
I don't know that I can necessarily answer that. What I will say, if this gives any indication, is that I will be out helping Brian Pinkston. I will be doing whatever it is that he needs me to do for his campaign to be successful. And you can take from that what you will.
Okay, that's a good statement. Any final words? I respect your heart, man.
Yeah.
I mean, this dude is working for free. He's working for free in a hornet's nest, literally in between, trying to bridge the gap between the community and citizens in creating trust and accountability with the police force.
Yeah.
Bridging the gap between a police force that's disenchanted and lacking inspiration from its leadership, and then trying to bridge the gap with the leadership of the police force and explaining what perhaps could or should happen to bring the community all back together. And he's doing this because he wants to give a voice to the voiceless, and that's the black and brown community that's being gentrified or priced out of the city of Charlottesville. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is you're not even getting like the respect or the props or the clap on the back.
At this
deserve.
point, at this point, I think, it got to the point where it's like, I don't even care. We've crossed that.
But you're human, though.
But this is, we've crossed that line. It's just like, I've seen too much, I know too much, and it just doesn't even matter. It's like, we got to make sure that this gets taken care of.
Susan Bates says you're a treasure for this community, as is Juan Diego Wade. A treasure, she said.
Yeah, that's, her son was good friends with my older brother, and I know Andrew as well. And Susan and I periodically message or whatever. But this is my home. I live here. I don't care if I got whatever suit or whatever. I still come from, down the block. So I still dap up my homies and everybody else. And you're not gonna.
Do you say that because people question, for lack of a better phrase, have people question your blackness? Is that why you're saying that?
No. I'm saying that because there are folk who, the people in the street, they know. They know. I don't have to. But there's this. I say it because, like, nobody's really listening. When you look around, nobody's really listening to them, to what they they may front and be like, oh, put them up on a poster or whatever. But at the end of the day, when all the lights are gone, they're getting screwed. And for me, that I say it, yeah. So there is that dichotomy that you may not see me in that, in what you would expect in that space. But I'm still that's born and bred. That's never it's never going to leave me. And especially when I'm, from here, living here, and folk that are not from here are having a greater impact on the folk that live here and who don't have the capital to be able to, participate fully here. I just no, that's not okay with me.
This is a follow-up from Grayson. We'll wrap on this. Isn't this politics? He just writes it. Isn't this politics? I would say this is not, I'll say this and throw it to you.
Yeah.
I will say this is not politics. I say this is a way that the marginalized are getting even more marginalized.
Yeah.
That I'd say this is hopefully that the policing piece of this is completely separate and removed from politics. It doesn't take an expert to realize that there seems to be a political partnership or connection that's been made between the mayor and the police chief. And that's me saying that. That's not you saying that. That's me saying that. It's pretty obvious that's what's happening here for anybody that follows it. So I guess what my response to Grayson's comment is, you hope the politics piece doesn't come to neighborhood policing, but it seems like it certainly is.
I'm not giving black folk wooden nickels. I'm not giving them whatever these tokens or whatever. In my career, it's always been about what have you delivered yesterday. I'm all about like delivering. I'm not on this intangible stuff. So that's what I'm going to continue to work on and call out BS when I see it, if it impedes what we're trying to do on behalf of our community. And hopefully folks step up to the plate. And this is one of the things that I said before, this week. We got too many white folk in this community who are scared of being called racist. Well, if you're
And
not,
what do you mean by that?
if you're not a racist, if
Then
you
who
know
cares
that
if you're called?
yeah, exactly. If you know that you're not a racist, who cares? Like when you see challenges and you see problems here, you can't just roll over and not do anything about it. So.
That's a good way to close. Jack says, we should have elected Bellamy Brown into office from the get-go. And multiple people have liked that comment. I agree. I agree with you, Jack. I agree. His name is Bellamy Brown. We have his entire statement on our social and on our Instagram. We will publish this interview across social and Instagram as well. I have a feeling that this is now going to be part of like the news cycle here. Just a heads up. Guys, I will say this. We're lucky to have Mr. Brown in this community, championing causes and bringing attention to causes and things that need attention that a lot of folks may not have the courage or the gumption or the backbone to do so. And what he did at the end of the Police Civilian Review Board meeting was the definition of courage and leadership. And courage and leadership doesn't always equate to winning popularity contests. But when you look back on courage and leadership with the benefit of hindsight, you realize that's when the change needle started moving in the direction it should. And it's often with the benefit of hindsight that true leaders get true accolades. But the crappy part is we have to get to the point of hindsight before the accolades come. And I am empathetic to Mr. Brown's plight. That is the show, special edition for a special man, Bellamy Brown. Judah Wickower, thank you for adjusting the schedule. All those that are asking, including the TV reporters, it'll be up on iloveseville.com later today. You guys have a good afternoon. Take care.
Yeah.
You?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.